mount a successful search. Obviously, due to the fact that there would be attacker is still on the loose, my neighbor has purchased a thorough security system for their home. I used to have a great side gig with a family friend where I would walk her dog for her every night. But then it all got ruined the other day. The family friend is an older woman who lives in a high-rise apartment in the downtown area of where I live. And I live in a house in one of the nearby suburbs, so it's an easy job for a quick couple of bucks. My boss, which I say lightly as it was a chill job, can't see very well at night now that she's gotten old, so I would show up around 8 p.m. to get the dog out for one last walk before they went to bed. The dog is just one of those tiny poodle things that you'd expect an old lady to have, so it was super easy to walk. The only problem is that I have to watch out for the sketchy people that come out of the woodwork after dark. My boss always stressed to me that I should be super careful because I'm a young girl walking around by myself, and I would just shrug it off and say I'd be fine. However, I know now that it was a serious warning, because I was fine right up until the moment that I wasn't. Started out like any other night. I walked the dog over to the little park across the street so it could wander around and do its thing. But at some point I noticed there was a sketchy man on the other side of the park standing in a dark spot beneath the tree. He was looking at me. I expected him to look away, but he didn't. He just kept staring. He was almost 100 feet away, but it still freaked me out. I pretended not to notice him still staring at me while I gave the dog another couple seconds to do its business, getting ready to cut the walk short. Then I saw out the corner of my eye that the man was walking towards me. I quickly picked the dog up and started power walking through the door back into the high rise. I kept looking over my shoulder and seeing that he was still following me, and he was even getting closer. I caught glimpses of his face. His eyes were fixated on me and his jaw was clenched. I picked up my pace and finally made it to the door. I scanned my key fob to get in and I rushed inside, hoping that the door would automatically lock before he got there. But a fraction of a second before the lock re-engaged, he swung the door wide open and walked right in. I swore inside my head and I jammed the button to call the elevator. Then I stared at the ground in front of me, hoping that anybody would show up. He pretended to wait for the elevator, except he wouldn't take his eyes off me and he kept taking steps closer. I refused to make eye contact, but I could still see him. He was your typical cracked out hobo. You know, the scary ones that twitch and scream at people when they walk by. I could smell the filth he was covered in. There was no way that he lived in that building, but he had the nerve to ask me if I did. Hey, do you live here? I ignored him. Just a few moments later, the elevator arrived, and I stepped on, absent-mindedly, of course. He followed right after I pressed the button for the floor I wanted to go to, as he kept trying to talk to me. Oh, that's my floor too. We could be neighbors. Do you live alone? When he asked that, I knew I was in serious danger. My heart was pounding. It was an agonizing 30 seconds, which I spent praying to God he wouldn't try anything in the elevator when it stopped. And as I walked out, the man followed. But thankfully, I didn't have to go far. My boss's apartment was the first one by the side elevator. So when I got to the door, I did the only thing I could think of, and I started pounding on the door like I was the police. I needed to somehow warn my boss that something was wrong when she came to the door. I was hoping that banging my fist against it nonstop would be enough. I could feel the stalker inching closer and closer behind me. It must have been at the last possible second before he grabbed me. When my boss finally came to the door, she opened it just a crack and glared through the window with a perplexed look on her face. And then she saw me.